So welcome everyone to our quarterly CFO meeting. So we'd like to start today. We have Director Mernix with us again. So Director, if you would like to say a few words before we get started.
Sure. Good morning, all. Thank you for being here. We really appreciate everything that our financial teams are doing during this very challenging time here. We have a lot to go through on the agenda today and really appreciate your attendance. We are always available to answer your questions. I think you all are aware of how to get in touch with us in the meantime. So again, I don't have a lot to present. My team will be presenting all of the information, but just welcome and thank you for being here and thanks for all that you are doing every day.
All right, thank you, Director. So we'll go ahead and get started. So Amber, if you would go to the next slide. So you will see that we have a pretty lengthy agenda again for our quarterly meeting. So to get things started, we're going to have Ben from OBM Budget to talk about the 2021 allotments.
Well, thank you, Melvin. Am I on? I think so. Well, good morning. My name is Ben Betcher, and I am the Budget Planning Section Chief at OBM. I wanted to take a few minutes this morning to walk through the high points of the fiscal year 21 allotment guidance that was released yesterday evening. As Director Mernix discussed on the CFO call last week, the economic impacts associated with the pandemic are likely to necessitate a reduction in GRF appropriations next fiscal year. OBM is still working to develop official estimates for fiscal year 20, as we are required to do by June 1st, pursuant to the governor's recent executive order. But we didn't want to wait to release this allotment guidance, as we know that agencies need to continue planning for next fiscal year. So what we've done on the GRF side is we've calculated an amount for each agency that will have to be allotted to a holding account, in this case, account 601. We are still making final tweaks to these holding targets and plan to release the numbers this week. Generally, the holding targets were calculated as 20% of each agency's projected account 510 through 550 expenditures. Agencies will have the flexibility to determine which of their lines should contribute a larger or smaller share to the holding target. Non-GRF allotments will equal 100% of fiscal year 21 appropriations. However, agencies are asked to consider whether any of their funds are being impacted by the pandemic. To the extent that they are, you're asked to work with your OBM budget analyst to institute appropriate spending controls, including allotting amounts to a holding account if appropriate. As an additional spending control, we will be moving to quarterly allotments for accounts 500 through 550. Other allotments will be annual. While the guidance didn't specify that account 510, which is purchased personal services, would be quarterly, it will in fact need to be allotted quarterly. Allotment budgets are due to OBM on Friday, June 12th, so we have roughly a month to put these together. If for some reason you haven't received the guidance memo, please let your OBM budget analyst know, and they'll send you a copy and make sure you are on the distribution list moving forward. With that, I'm happy to attempt to answer any questions that anyone may have.
Well, thank you, Ben. So next up, we have an update from Fletch for the controlling board.
Hello, everybody. Melvin, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. No, thanks for letting me join, and I'll try and keep it short and sweet. I think everybody's heard from the controlling board team quite a bit, and that will continue as we navigate the environment that we're in. You know, we're in the home stretch right now. We have 2 meetings left, one on June 1st and one on June 15th, And for the June 1st meeting, just want to kind of paint a little picture of what we're looking at. We have 190 total requests. Most of those are new. 60 of them are from past meetings. So, you know, of the 190, 60 are older. And, you know, we will continue to scrutinize them, as you have read in the CFO Newsflash and as you have heard from me in prep meetings and things like that, and individual phone calls, that, you know, we're going to continue this high level of scrutiny. We hear about it constantly, meaning the controlling board team and the director, and I'm sure, you know, we hear about it from the members and other legislative, you know, staff, things like that. So we're constantly hearing about what goes before controlling board. So we're going to keep up our level of scrutiny to make sure that what does make it to an agenda is the absolute most important item for each respective agency and institution. So we will continue to have we will likely continue to have the type of deferral situation that we've been dealing with over the last couple months. You know, when we put something on the agenda, we intend for it to stay on the agenda, but it doesn't always work out that way. So I just want to prepare everybody, as I've done so, I think, in our, you know, one-off prep meetings on the Friday before controlling board meeting, to just be aware that things are always subject to change, more so than ever in this environment. So, but I do think that everybody, you know, that was involved in the last controlling board meeting on the 11th, we didn't have that many deferrals. We had higher ed deferral, 2 items, and then 1 from the Attorney General's office. And other than that, it went very smoothly. So, but I just don't, you know, we just don't know that it's going to be like that every single meeting. It kind of goes every other meeting. So we just prepare as though it's you know, it's going to be a very challenging meeting every time, just like we have done even in non-corona situations. And so, but I would also like to thank everybody for doing all their homework and doing all their outreach. I mean, Megan and I do hear from members of the controlling board and their staff, and they appreciate it. We also hear when agencies don't do that. So more often than not, we're hearing when an agency doesn't communicate or attempt to communicate with members. So again, please keep up the redundancy that you already you do, and how you conduct yourselves with the, you know, communication with the members. You know, that includes if it's a phone call and you don't get somebody, send them an email. If you don't hear from them, at least you've done your due diligence and you've been redundant, and you have a paper trail of trying to communicate with the members or the staff. I think that's the best thing you can do. Sometimes not every member is going to be responsive to you, one, because they don't care, or just because by design or whatever reason they may have. So I think just, you know, keep up the good work. And just one thing to anticipate, June 1st, we will be moving back to the State House for our meetings. So what that will look like is the March 25th controlling board meeting. So please go ahead, if you didn't participate in that, which there weren't that many that did. Thanks, Ryan. My daughter's telling me about something on YouTube. So anyway, I would just say, watch the March 25th meeting, get a sense of what it's like. I think almost everybody on here is probably going to have some involvement with controlling board over the next couple meetings. So what we did there was we had a meeting where the members were in the House Finance Room, and then there was a direct connection to the State House atrium, and that's kind of where at least the press corps was. I don't know if it'll look exactly that way. Megan and I will have guidance out with logistics and specifics here when we have that ready, to make sure everybody's prepared for that. But you know, just I would anticipate being available for an in-person meeting. So with that, I think I'd just try to keep it short and sweet. If there are questions, I'm always happy to answer them. If you don't want to ask them in this bigger, broader group, please give me a call or email me.
All right, thank you, Fred.
We do have one question that came through. Are we allowed to reduce earmarks by 20%?
So I think that's going to be a question for Ben, Nikki.
Okay.
Yeah. Any reductions in requests is welcome. So.
We'll get back to you on that. I'll ask for further clarification.
All right, Nikki.
That's the only question so far, and we did realize that the chat panel was disabled. I apologize for that. Everybody should now have the ability to type in questions, though.
I can hang tight for another minute if you want to wait, but up to you, Melvin.
Yeah, well, I don't see anything coming through either, Nikki, so I think we're good. So thank you, Fletch. And now we're going to move on to Chris Sargent, who's going to start our annual year-end update, and then I'll interject here at the end after Chris gets through.
All right, good morning. Uncertain times that we're in right now, but we're in this together, no doubt. And I just want you to know that OBM is here for you to answer any questions that you may have. And as we move in now, the most certain thing that we'll have is we're going to close out the fiscal year, no doubt. So the year-end updates overview, just to kind of feed off of Fletch here, the June 15th date is the last controlling board meeting for this fiscal year. The last day for accounts payable processing rules would be Monday, June 22nd. That is a little different than last year. Last year, we actually closed out the processing rules and the approval rules on the same day. They're going to be different this year. So the processing rules will end on June 22nd. Last day for requisitions and change orders will be the same day, Monday, June 22nd also. To the next slide. The last day to submit travel authorizations and expense reports will also be the same day as like last year, Friday, June 12th. And the last day to approve travel authorizations and expense reports will be Monday, June 15th. So that's a high-level overview of just the year-end close processes. So the keys to a successful close. Like last year, communication, plan, coordinate, especially the time that we're in right now, that's so important. And I just want to add, I mean, we've seen a lot of great things so far, just the communication through the time that we're in right now. I really appreciate all the efforts out there. Cleanup, I cannot stress that enough, especially right now, just starting early, even today through May. It's great just to make sure that we're just continuously cleaning up those processes. Reach out to us, let us know if there's anything we can do to help you on that end. As I've always said, use the Oaks Fin agency month-end checklist. They're found on the Fin source. The next slide will actually give you a detailed view of what that looks like. It's located in the finsource.ohio.gov, the Oaks Fin process manual, the Oaks Fin agency month-end checklist. And as you notice there's the Oaks payable, receivable, asset management, billing, and it goes on. Travel expense, that's a big issue right now with some of the travel restrictions that we have in place. And I'll hit on that here in a second. So as to the next slide, this is more of the detailed view. So if you're into the details, this is it right here for you. This is the calendar. As you'll notice, the Saturday, Sundays will be available for Oaks processing from 6 a.m. to 11:59 p.m. On the weekends. You'll notice on Friday, June 12th will be the first day that we actually close or actually cut off security roles. So the central security designated roles will be shut off at that time. As I mentioned, on June 15th will be the last controlling board meeting. As Fletch said, that's evolving, so more information if anything like that changes. And then to the next slide is going to be a lot of your big cutoff roles, which is the June 22nd and the June 23rd dates. As I mentioned, the June 22nd, that's the last day for AP processing. For June 23rd will be the last day for AP approval rules. They'll be cut off at that point. So to the next slide here. So again, it's the agency responsibility to really assist in the cleanup efforts. And as I mentioned, feel free to reach out to OBM if there's anything we can do to help you in that. I will say that, as I mentioned, with the travel restrictions that are currently in place, and as you're aware with the COVID-19 pandemic, a travel restriction was issued by the governor on March 10th. Based on this latest guidance, the only travel which should remain at this time is only travel that is in-state and deemed mission critical by an agency director. I did reach out to agencies on March 27th and the 30th that had open travel authorizations in Oaks, and I asked if they no longer needed to be needed, that we would just clean those up. Just to provide an update to everyone, as of April 27th, there are still 1,178 open travel authorizations in Oaks. Although I understand, if they're mission critical, they can remain. Feel free to reach out to me though if you need any help in cleaning up those. We're certainly here for you, and we understand that that's a big effort. So just let me know if there's anything I can do to help you guys. And last but not least, with the closure of the POs and requisitions, the operating encumbrances and the SAFE manual is always good to review during this time. So, any questions?
Chris, I believe we have one question for you, and I think one question for Fletch. Oh, you just got another question. So, your first question is, will agencies be permitted latitude in moving estimated allotments forward after submission, particularly for non-500 accounts? Not all invoicing is submitted per a pre-established schedule.
Okay, yeah, let me, if I can get back with you on that, I'll check into it.
Okay, and I will send you that question as well.
Perfect, thank you.
And then the second question, oh, actually it says this may be for Ben or Chris. DNR is having issues with vendors completing work for purchase orders issued this fiscal year. Is there any consideration being given to extend the date for when purchase orders are usually closed by OBM?
So OBM doesn't close those until November. So they should have time to be able to work with those suppliers before those POs will get closed, because that language is in the budget bill, and that language will not be able to get extended unless there's other legislation that happens.
Okay. And then the last question is, will contracts be allotted at 100% for the first quarter, so purchase orders can be done at the full amounts?
Well, I think that would depend on the allotment plans that the individual agencies put together. The guidance did not provide that level of detail. I think it would be up to the agencies to structure their allotment plans accordingly.
Okay, that's everything that's come through so far.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. So if everybody did not receive the memo, it is out on the MyOhio. Plus our communications group sent it out to the CFO list. So you can find this year-end close memo. If not, reach out and we can get it to you. The last thing that I wanted to talk about from the year-end close perspective is payroll. This comes down to just a timing issue of when everything happens and when June 30th actually is going to happen based on when the last biweekly payroll happens. So similar to what we did last fiscal year, we are going to generate the payroll journals that's going to be for the pay date of July 2nd. They will have a journal date of July 1st. But we will change the budget date on those journals so that it hits the prior fiscal year appropriation and allotments. So anybody that is an agency that normally has to upload a corrective journal, or what we call a C journal, to replace that journal coming from HCM, you need to reach out to Amber Pugh so that we can coordinate that and get that budget date changed on those journals that you upload. This was done way back early in the beginning of the year because we were afraid that once you knew what your payroll costs were going to be on probably that weekend of June 27th, that was only going to give us a day and maybe a half a day for people that needed to draw in grant money. We do need to get all these payroll journals posted before we could actually close the fiscal year. So that is why we're going back to the method where we're going to date them July 1st to give the agencies that week. Because with the holiday of July 4th, that means that the state will have the holiday on July 3rd, which is a Friday because the 4th was on a Saturday. So again, if you have questions about the payroll, you can reach out to me or Amber Pugh, and we can walk you through that process. And I just wanted to add in here, just to have the agencies a reminder. I know Communications sent out a reminder, I believe it was on March 30th, to update the agency contact list that we have at OBM. The link on this screen will take you to that database. If you have any issues, you can reach out to Terry Lester or to this app support email address. There have been a lot of communications that we've had to send out lately. So we want to make sure that everybody is updating that accordingly so that everybody can receive that proper communication. So here is a list. I'm not going to go through all of them, but the next two slides is communications that we have sent out since the last CFO meeting that we had. So you'll go through and you'll see where, the emergency purchases was sent out on March 13th. And Amber, if you go to the next slide, you'll see that there was a massive communication on March 20th that was talking about all the different restrictions, all the different changes that we had to make because of the COVID event that we are currently in. So again, this is just a reminder to go to that contact database and update all your contacts for your agencies accordingly. So again, there was another big communication with several different topics that just went out on April 14th. So you can see that we've been sending out a ton of different communications on different topics in the last couple months. And with that, Nikki, before we get into Stacy's presentation, so we'll see if there's any questions about the payroll or the contact database.
Yes, we actually have a few questions that came in. The first one is, so an agency is allowed to front load allotments for encumbrances and pay against those encumbrances throughout the year if that is the way that the agencies want to structure their allotments. Is that correct?
So Ben, I think that's more directed towards you again.
I will receive confirmation. I believe that would be correct. Yes, but let me confirm and we'll have the analyst provide that clarification when the control totals are sent out.
Yeah, and from a system perspective, I will tell you that if you try to do all your POs in the first quarter, because this happens currently with our subsidy account because it's already on quarterly, if you try to do any type of refund of expenditures and you don't have expenditures in the next quarters, you'll go into a budget error. So you really should look and try to figure out how you can structure some of these payments quarterly, because if you try to do it all in the first quarter, you will run into some issues that we'll have to correct if you need to get a refund of expenditure back where they couldn't spend that money.
Okay, and the next question is, just to confirm, so the July 2nd payroll should not be included in the Q1 allotments for fiscal year 21.
That is correct. That is going to pull from fiscal year 20 appropriations.
Okay, and the next one is, what is the pay period ending date for the payroll that will get the journal date of 7/1 and post during fiscal year 2020?
So let me look at my calendar. So that should be pay period ending date of June 20th.
Okay.
And I don't have it up right now, but you can always go out to the HCM resource off of My Ohio. They have that calendar there that's already scheduled that has pay period end dates versus pay dates. But I believe the pay period end date is going to be June 20th for the payroll date of what's going to be actually July 2nd this year.
Okay, we have 2 more questions. Will the fiscal year 21 BI payroll projections report be updated to remove the 3% July increase since the pay raises are on hold? Or should agencies budget their allotments using the current fiscal year 21 BI payroll projections report, which includes the 3% increase?
So Ben, okay.
As far as I'm aware, no official decision has been made regarding the COLA, at least not one that I can speak to. So I can't answer that question.
Okay. So we'll have to have more follow-up on that as things get closer to fiscal year 21.
Okay, and the next question, allotment guidance states that payroll supplies, maintenance, and equipment need to be allotted quarterly. How does it work in terms of encumbrance like rent? Does that mean that we have to process the PO quarter by quarter? For rent, this could mean 4 POs.
Yes, I believe that would be correct. Melvin, I don't know if you have any information you might be able to contribute there, but I think that would be the case. You would pay it quarterly.
Really, I think in the situation that we're in, the quarterly is what we're asking everybody to do. Yes, it may be a little more work than the one annual PO that you did, but I think it's going to be able to give them more information. And again, the system, you can go in and change those budget dates and go and create those purchase orders with the dates, just like what probably a lot of agencies are trying to create purchase orders already for fiscal year 21.
And those are all the questions so far.
Okay. Well, with that, we will move on to Stacy Massey to talk about the COVID funding and the federal funding that we're getting.
Perfect. So you all can hear me good?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, so I'm going to talk about a little bit about federal grants update. So if you joined my Enterprise Grants Forum, you're probably already aware and have a lot of this information. So I'll try not to go into too much detail because I don't want to be duplicative for a lot of people that attended the forum last week. But the Ohio Grants Partnership Policy was released on April 20th. That policy established the Ohio Grants Partnership and a lot of the efforts we'd already been working on. It was fast-tracked due to the increase in COVID funding and the need for that policy to get out there. You can access the policy through the SAFE manual, and here's the link. And within the policy, it really defines the partnership's visions and incorporates several key functions, such as the Enterprise Grants Forum, which we had started up in December, and we've met several times. And we had a previous iteration of that forum prior to that, so that shouldn't be new to a lot of folks, as well as an advisory committee that we intend to establish to guide some of the challenges and things that are submitted to the forum to prioritize and work through issues. So that is incorporated into the policy, as well as training and outreach, which is something that is probably a little bit newer to the actual forum or the group, and that we do have a website that's been stood up in the last few days. That's grants.ohio.gov, and that will provide more information, tips and tricks, best practices and tools. And so we hope to get that stood up in the future for agencies to populate funding opportunities that will be on that site. That functionality is coming soon. So let's go to the next slide. So also other key areas that were in the policy, centralized resource for funding opportunities and grant related resources. And that's really the website, and also putting out funding opportunities so that the state's very transparent, that there's one location to find funding opportunities. Because what we've heard from locals is that it's difficult to find opportunities at the state because there's not one location. So some agencies have it on a website, others just have a group that they can send opportunities out to. So it makes it difficult for a local government to find funding opportunities at the state. And I can imagine our subrecipients have struggled with that in the past. It also calls out a single point of contact for state grant applications. And I just want to make sure that I squash this rumor that OBM will not be applying for you. You will continue to apply for your grants the way that you do today. When this is stood up, and it will be like the clearinghouse, if some of you have been around in government for a while, it'll be like this state clearinghouse that happened many years ago, and where concurrently with applying, you would submit to OBM application information so that we make sure that we're being competitive, we're pulling in all the funding opportunities we can as a state, and we're not stepping on each other's toes and competing against each other. So that is really the main goal of the single point of contact. But just so you know, I do not intend to go out to grants.gov and applying for everyone across the state. That would be very monumental. So you still continue to do the process as you do today. Collaboration of federal funding, and a good example is the efforts that's going on right now with COVID funding. There's a lot of funding coming out. We're up to $8.2 billion, and that increases, seems like every week, with new plus up programs for existing programs, plus new programs. So it becomes more important to strategize that funding across the enterprise. We've done some efforts where folks have wanted to apply for some CARES Act money that's been competitive, and there were other state agencies that were stronger in the actual opportunity, and we're connecting those agencies. So it's best that we have a strategy and we're bringing in the most dollars to benefit the state of Ohio. So that is really key in what we're doing right now, but that's been baked into the policy as well, that collaboration effort. Grant-related letters of support. So if you have subrecipients that are contacting you and you've been working through getting sign off or letters of support for those subrecipients for them to apply directly with the federal government, that's one thing that the office will be coordinating. So if you have any of those, please some examples to me. I already have one, I think, that I received from an agency, and we're determining how we'll move forward. Send those to me and you, and see if that's something that we want to coordinate through the governor's office, or if you can continue to endorse your subrecipients as you've done today. Continuing to explore future standardization opportunities. Just as we continue to grow, are there areas where we can standardize? I know we talked a lot about that in the last few years when we were working through a potential enterprise grant solution technologically. So just things that we can do, maybe outside of technology, maybe there is a technology need, just what makes sense to standardize. And that's where, as a partnership, we need all of you to help us get through that. Also, like I talked before in the last slide about the local outreach strategy, there's really a focus in the policy about making sure that our partners as subrecipients know how to do business with the state. They're educated. The stronger stewards they are with the grant dollars, the stronger we are as a state with not having audit findings and handling the funds. We become more competitive when we handle grant funds the best way without compliance issues, and we reduce the subrecipient burden or the reporting burden, or even if we standardize, which is the previous bullet, and we can push more money towards the program and we use less money towards administrative functions. That is what means that's a win for everyone. It's less that administratively we're managing those grant dollars, but also it allows more to go out to the program what the actual money was intended for in the first place. Next slide. So I am not going to talk about these in any detail, but I want you to be aware that there are 4 bulletins or memos that have been put out there, published by the U.S. Office of Management and Budget. And within these memos, it grants flexibility and relieves some administrative burdens to the management of grant funds moving forward, some of which it addressed issues such as repurposing people that are funded with grant dollars to do COVID-related efforts. It addresses issues such as maybe you had travel that got restricted or canceled and you have cancellation fees typically that would not be allowed on a grant. And these flexibilities granted in these memos allow that. So I would encourage you, if you handle grant funds, to go out and at least acquaint yourself or read these memos. It is important to know within the memos that the OMB at the federal level has granted this flexibility and these exceptions to the federal agencies, but that does not necessarily mean that the federal agencies that you receive funding from will adopt them. So it is very important to know that this has been granted to the federal agency you receive your funding from, but also to double check with your federal awarding agency to make sure that they are recognizing these memos and granting these flexibilities. Thus, this just allowed them to do so. So if you'll go to the next slide, it will show the other two memos. So as we progress through COVID and our response, as you'll see in April, the third memo was released to repurpose federal assistance programs that already exist for COVID-related efforts where available. So you may have received some either increases in existing programs or some flexibilities may have been pushed down with programs that you already have. And then the last memo, it's a good one to read, but it really starts to address how the federal government will be coding things and allowing the ability for accountability and transparency with all of the additional dollars. But it also told them how they should be making sure they're reducing our burden for reporting. So what I have heard on some calls from OMB is that CARES Act in particular, where there were reporting requirements that were very specifically put in there about funding for COVID that came out as part of the funding, that OMB is directing the federal agencies to do all that they can to reduce that burden, and that they anticipate FFADA reporting to take care of a lot of the reporting that is part of the CARES Act. So unlike if you were around during our grant days where the states were required to do significant amounts of reporting each month, the OMB at this point is anticipating its federal government may be able to take care of a lot of that burden with some of the reporting they've established as a result of the DATA Act. So more to come on that, but continue to keep your FFADA updated for anything that you award because they do plan to use that. So I just wanted to call out all of the funding legislation. The first funding legislation kind of happened really early on. That provided some funding to health, but then as we moved throughout, the Families First then opened up some flexibilities around Family Medical Leave Act and more payroll specific. The third one was the CARES Act. That was the largest chunk where you may have seen a lot of money come out as plus ups to existing programs or maybe some new programs. There continues to be competitive opportunities that come out frequently about CARES Act money that's been at the federal government and that is discretionary and they're pushing out competitively. So if I see any of that, I will be pushing that towards your agencies to see if you're aware of it and if maybe you think your subrecipients might benefit from applying for that or if the state should apply for that. And then the Paycheck Protection Program, which really where that becomes important is if you are granting funds to subrecipients and you're helping the business sector, you just need to make sure there's duplication. That program, that legislation allowed for some additional funding to go to the businesses, which there's some money out of the CARES Act, which also has eligibility for that same thing. So that's where there's the potential, because we have a lot of overlapping funding sources for duplicative things, where we just need to make sure our subrecipients are only using our federal funds once and not charging different programs for the same costs. Next slide. So at the time I did this slide, Ohio was estimated to be allocated 7.7 billion. As of a few days ago, that's now up to 8.2 billion for the first 3 acts outside of FEMA funding or any direct FEMA support. So that's a significant amount of money. So I just wanted to call that out so that we're all aware on the various efforts that are going on across the state. Now, some of that money is going directly to locals or specific subrecipients, but a lot of it's passed through the state. It addressed about 60 different programs to state agencies or direct to locals. So that's a lot of additional funding coming into Ohio. And like I was talking about that last slide, there are a lot of overlapping programs that cover related COVID costs. So we're starting to see some of that as funding comes out. So I just want to make you aware as you're doing your monitoring, as you're pushing out funding, to make sure that you're aware what your subrecipient spend is and that they're not duplicating. The Ohio Grants Partnerships right now working on coordination for the largest bucket the state's received, which is a coronavirus relief fund that we're working to coordinate to make sure costs are for agencies that have submitted to me each week, that we can get some reimbursement for those for what's eligible. Now, why I say that there's overlapping programs, many of you may have applied to the FEMA Public Assistance Program through Ohio Emergency Management Agency. Unfortunately, that's kind of a super slow process. You may have just started the application process now, and you may not know what's eligible or what's going to be reimbursed. So as we work with agencies that have submitted costs to me, we have a form that we'll be sending to you. On the form, we'll want you to delineate anything that you've applied for through FEMA, because if you do get reimbursed, you cannot be paid for that twice. So that can even happen at the federal level. So as I call out, you should be careful what your subrecipients are submitting to you. We also should be careful that we're tracking our costs and we're only recovering the funds once. So with that, I think we have another slide moving on about tracking of COVID money. So as you're rolling through and handling COVID funds, you just need to make sure of a couple things. One, that if you are getting federal funding, that you ensure that the federal award, each federal award has a grant ID and that you've identified that so that you know when you're handling COVID funds and which grant IDs apply to what programs. So although we have not had a policy in the past, there was a CFO newsflash that directed that you should be using or need to be using, shall be using one grant ID chart field for each award. If you haven't been doing that, you should be doing that. We're going to need you to do that because we need to track this from a reporting standpoint, and it will actually save less heartache for you and us in the end for reporting purposes. New revenue codes were also sent out, and I think 2 news flashes. So as you'll see here, these are the reporting codes that we have established for COVID funding. So if you are receiving funds for COVID out of the CARES Act or any of the other legislation, please make sure you are using these revenue account codes, not your standard revenue account codes that you would use for your specific Department of Justice. It might have a code. This is one that's specific for the COVID funding. If you've already received funding, please go back and double check and also make sure that you're doing modifications to that before the fiscal year end to change the account code if you didn't use the right one. Another thing that you also should do is, it's a good practice, best practice, if you're not doing this, when you did establish your grant ID, please make sure your grant ID is on your revenue entry so that you can know how much revenue you've received for each grant, and it all tracks to the same grant ID. I'm hoping a lot of you are already doing that, and that's, so let's go to the next slide. So I'm not saying anything. So is there any questions? And I'll pause for that. There's a lot of information there. We will be reaching out to agencies on the coronavirus relief money. We have a form that we'll be sending agency to agency. We're trying to do a call with everybody to walk them through what we need on that form. So stay tuned if you've not heard from us. We're starting with the larger impacted agencies first. We hope to get to everybody in the next few weeks. Nikki, any questions coming in?
Yeah, so I actually have 2 questions that I believe are directed to you, and then 2 questions that may be for some of the other groups. The first question is, can you get reimbursements for costs paid for with the current federal grant funds?
Can you repeat that? Can you get reimbursement?
Can you get reimbursements for costs paid for with current federal grant funds?
So if you have costs that are incurred that you've already recovered with federal grant funding, then no, federal grant funding will not cover that twice, if I understand that question correctly.
Okay, and I'll let her know if she wants us to unmute. We can definitely do that. The next one is for the federal COVID funding or FEMA, are technology IT purchases for things like laptops for staff working remotely, will those be reimbursed by the federal government?
So if it was a teleworking cost and you've been reporting those to me weekly, when we go through the spreadsheet, we will work those with you. There is very limited guidance. It's very broad. I guess I should say limited. It's broad, but it's a very little direction on what's eligible. It does have a list of things. I think telework, things that were not previously budgeted, that's the important part. So if you did have to expend funds for things that you did not previously budget and you would not have bought otherwise, then yes, that would be something that would be eligible. As the way I interpret the 4 pages of guidance, it's been, like I say, limited. It's flexible and broad, sort of flexible, not as flexible as we would like, but it's only 4 pages. So there's some things that have come out in the frequently asked questions that have been more defined, but that's a little bit far in between. So we'll work through that, but at this moment, you should be reporting those to us because we do believe that may be allowed. Just for the coronavirus relief fund. If you have other grant funding sources, you will work those through your federal awarding agency.
And he did follow up and say that the equipment has been ordered but not received yet. So they're not on the weeklies as they have not been expensed yet.
Yes, so, and that's a good point. We're working through, so we went to controlling board a few weeks ago for 35 million. We're just trying to get what we can done before fiscal year end with people that had the most impacts. But then when we move into the next fiscal year, this funding is all the way through the end of December with expenses incurred. So don't worry about that. We intend to continue to follow up with that. So just keep reporting to me weekly. We're getting a point in time snapshot to recover what you've already expended to date. And then we'll continue to be following up after that.
Okay, and another grants question that came through, the Child Nutrition COVID Block Grant Funds, multiple programs such as lunch and breakfast. We will have a separate COVID grant for each.
Okay, so I would expect that you would probably want a different grant ID number for those, if that's the question.
And I'm not sure if, and he did say, yes, that is the question.
Okay, perfect.
And the next question, I'm not sure if it's for you. It says, regarding quarterly allotment, can you please clarify how agencies will be able to comply with ORC 126.07 that requires a full fiscal year encumbrance in order to make the contract enforceable? It's my understanding that the last time the state did quarterly allotments, the first quarter was substantially higher in order to allow agencies to fully encumber contracts. Will this be considered?
It's probably more towards Ben. Did we lose Ben? You're muted, Melvin. I can't hear you.
Ben's still on. So we'll have to follow up. I'm sure we're going to need to reach out to our legal and we'll get back with you on that question.
Okay.
So I'm going to jump in here. Hey, this is Kim Ernix. I would just say the overarching goal would be to first look at all of your contracts and attempt to make reductions to ensure that they fit within the budgeted control totals. So that would be the first objective. And then any issues with how to allot that in the quarterly allotment process, you should work through that with your budget analyst.
Okay.
Great, thank you. And then we had two other questions come through. The first one is personal service account 510 quarterly allotted as well?
Yes.
Yes, but that's not.
Yes.
Okay, great, yes. And then they had a follow-up question to that is, with payroll, is step increase suspended too?
So this is Kim again. All of the payroll related issues will be addressed in the coming weeks. And I would say, as far as your allotment process, you should be conservative at this point in time, but those questions will be answered in the upcoming weeks.
Great, and those are all the questions so far.
Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you, Stacy. So now we're going to move on to the treasurer state, and we have Jennifer Day and Jennifer Biedenharm.
Hi, everyone. We want to start with the state results for deposits. As we near the fiscal year end, the Treasurer's Office would like to remind all agencies, please send in their revenue documents to the cashiers in a timely fashion. We know this year has presented challenges for performing all the daily routines, but we wanted to commend everyone for doing a great job during this difficult time. We ask that you continue to reconcile your agency bank accounts timely and respond to the Treasurer's Office emails related to deposits.
And hi, this is Jennifer Day. Confirmation of outgoing wires by the Treasurer's Office. We've taken a few extra steps during this time. Our banks immediately reached out to us. There's a lot of fraud going on. There is another state I won't mention that actually lost $10 million in a fraudulent wire that they will not be able to get back. So we're taking extra precautions. Any international wire that an agency has, we will be calling back. We'll be doing a lot more due diligence to make sure that it's valid. But also, we just want to encourage you, for agencies that can initiate wires and ACHs, please make sure that the companies that you're dealing with, where you're sending the money, is valid, even if it takes an independent validation. Just be extra careful right now. And if it's a template, if we're using a template at the bank, we won't be giving a call back. But if it's definitely not, if it's a free form wire, we will be doing extra checking. And so we may call you, we may email you, we may email a supervisor to make sure that everything is correct and valid before it goes out, just to for everybody's safety. And then for night deposits, the next one on the list. So night deposits, especially the agencies that are coming into downtown, but even if you're out of downtown Columbus, the banks right now are still closed. Branches are still closed, but the drive-throughs are open. So if you need to make a deposit, you can go through the drive-through, send a deposit ticket to Revenue Management, the Treasurer's Office, along with your OAKS document. So we'll know where the deposit was made. And the other thing is, if you are coming in downtown and processing your revenue, the banks that we deal with downtown all have night deposit boxes, drop boxes, except for U.S. Bank. But I also want you to know that the Treasurer's Office has a drop box. So you can always come over to the Rhodes Tower, 9th floor, to the right of our cashier's department. There is a drop box there that you can just drop your deposits in, and the Treasurer's Office will process the next day.
So ACH credit option to accept customer payments. The COVID pandemic has highlighted some processes that aren't the most convenient. For example, accepting cash and checks at this time from customers. So we would ask and encourage you all to encourage your customers to use the ACH credit payment option. The Treasurer's Office sent out an email on ACH credit and payment instructions to all agencies in a memorandum in late March. If you need a copy forwarded to you, just let us know and we can send you one. Your customers will need to provide instructions to their financial institution to initiate the ACH credit payments. This ACH credit payment pushes the payment from the customer client bank to account to the state treasury.
And in line with what Jennifer just said about ACH credit, for lock boxes, that is also another option. And we've worked with a couple agencies already to set up lock boxes for revenue processing. I just put that on there because we will be happy to work with you and our banks to open a lockbox if that's what you'd like. But it's not an immediate solution. It takes a couple weeks to implement a lockbox. So if you're thinking, I can't get into the office, I can't open my mail, I can't process my checks, perhaps we can just have a bank do it. It's not immediate. So we just put that on there that it is an option, and we'll be happy to work with you on that. Just not going to get it done quickly. And the last thing we have with other news is the Ohio Board of Deposits. They designated the banks, and the banks are the same that we have now, which are Key Bank, U.S. Bank, Huntington Bank, PNC, JP Morgan, and Fifth Third. Those banks were designated again by the Board of Deposit, and the accounts, no accounts moved around. So if you have an account at one of those banks, it did remain there. The thing, though, that changed was that Bank of America was approved as a depository, an active depository by the Board of Deposit. So we will be working with Bank of America to enter into a banking services agreement, a contract. And so after July 6th, I think, is the start date of the contract. Bank of America will be available for opening bank accounts with. So if you're interested in that and you have the statutory authority, we'll be happy to work with you with Bank of America. And if you have any questions, it's real easy to remember. Just call one of the Jennifers, call Stacy Cumberlander, but you reach out to us if you have any questions. And that's the update for the Treasurer's Office.
Great, thank you, Jennifer. So
Any
Nikki,
questions?
I don't believe we have any questions for the Treasurer's Office. We do have another question about a previous topic. It states that payroll normally has you estimate 100% of approved positions. In this case, should we look at what positions we believe will actually be filled because of the hiring freeze?
This is
Yes,
Ben Betcher.
definitely.
Yes, I apologize too. I lost internet connection a few minutes ago, and I know I missed some questions, so I apologize for that.
And that's the only question I have right now, Melvin.
Okay, well, thank you, Nikki. So now we are going to move on to Andrew Cochran to give us an update on Ohio Buys. So I just want to do a quick time check. We got about 28 minutes left in the meeting, so I think we're good to go.
All right, good morning, everyone. Yeah, so wanted to provide a quick update on Ohio Buys here for you. So Melvin, if you could go to the next slide here. We've got a couple of introductory slides in here, so just in the interest of time, I'll kind of scoot past the first couple of slides here. Melvin, if you could go to the next one for me. This slide here just really kind of recaps the whole purpose and strategic objectives of Ohio Buys. Really kind of, as it's stated there on the left, really focused on trying to not only streamline the procurement processes, obviously make them electronic, bring them into an electronic procurement system, standardize those processes where we can, make use of some more innovative technology, gather more data to do a better job of strategically analyzing our spend and making more informed decisions, and also making sure that we're trying to make it easier to do business with the state, make it a more business-friendly experience for our suppliers as well. So next slide there. Next slide, please. We'll skip over that one. So just real quick, we are, just to remind everyone, working with a number of agencies right now on our design team. We actually have Office of Budget and Management is one of those agencies, and then also working with the other four agencies that you see listed there, DRC and DOIS. They kind of had joint representation. So we sort of think of them as one agency, but it's really two separate, obviously. And then the early adopter agencies, you can see all of those listed there. Those are actually the agencies that we're currently working with to actually use the functionality, help us identify enhancements to make to the system, which I'll talk about here in a little bit. And then we're also working with each of our requisite procurement programs, working with them in a couple of different ways. One, to actually have them logging into the system, reviewing those requisitions, approving those requisitions or denying them based on you know, the particular use case at hand. And then we're also working with each of them to actually use the system for their purchasing needs as well. Next slide, please. So just kind of a highlight of some of the features that are already available here. You do have the ability, users have the ability to go and actually search for those items, whether they be products or services, available on more than 1,200 state contracts. Our catalog team and our contract teams are working on continuing to build catalogs out for the rest of our contracts portfolio. And so those numbers do continue to rise. A wide array of different products and services that can be purchased in there. Users do have the ability to buy things that are not on contract as well, so they can do direct purchases and what we would call a free form requisition to put those items into their cart and procure those items as well. And then a couple of other things that we always just like to highlight. You know, I think the biggest one really is around those automated workflows and giving users the ability to actually see where their transaction is at in the life cycle of that workflow. It actually presents a flow chart for them. It's color coded to kind of indicate what steps are complete, what steps are in progress, where the request is going to go next, as well as who the actors are, who the performers are on those particular steps. And so it's easy for a user to jump into the system and look at where the requisition is, who's working on it, so they know who to reach out to if they have questions or need to communicate with the person handling their requisition. And that really applies for all different workflows throughout the system. Also do have what we call quick quoting, which is really the ability for users to take a requisition and then actually flip that over into a sourcing event that gets posted out publicly on the Ohio Buys public portal. And what that allows us to do is actually make suppliers aware of those opportunities to compete for state business. We see this heavily utilized when we start talking about state term schedule purchases where users need to get 3 quotes. And so we're working you know, with our suppliers and with our agency users to continue to increase the use of that functionality. Certainly something that as we move into release 3, where we start to talk about doing all solicitation and contract management in the system, that we'll see that functionality continue to grow out and be used even more. And then users also do have the ability to just kind of, you know, what we like to call guided buying. So really kind of presenting them with tool tips, presenting them with alerts as they move through the system, trying to direct them in the right path so that it's not as manual of a process for someone to think, do I need to stop and get a purchase, an approval from a requisite program? Do I need a release and permit? The system is really configured to route all of those things automatically. And you know, obviously the intent there is really, like I said, to just kind of make it easier for people to do their jobs, not have to think quite as much about where to go, what boxes to check along the way. Next slide, please. At a very high level, this slide just kind of summarizes the different sets of functionality that are already live in Ohio Buys. As we've talked about, the ability to not only create requisitions, ultimately then generate those purchase orders, do receiving, and then actually giving suppliers the ability to flip purchase orders into invoices in Ohio Buys as well. This has been a topic that the DAS and OBM have been very closely collaborating on. You know, obviously with e-settlements out there, want to make sure that we're in lockstep kind of on what we're doing related to PO Flip in Ohio Buys. And like I said, we've been partnering with OBM, continuing to kind of pilot the functionality here, and then ultimately looking to, you know, stay in touch and really kind of long-term decide on a strategy moving forward here. Next slide. This slide just kind of gives you a visual aid in terms of what I was talking about earlier, where users, as they're in the system, can actually go and see a part of the screen that will actually summarize where in the workflow their particular transaction is. And so the green boxes will indicate that step is complete. The orange boxes will indicate that's the step that's currently in progress. And then down there at the bottom of the page, users actually have the ability to see, who in particular has that task right now, as well as see the history on when have other steps in the workflow when have they started, when have they completed, who completed them, different things like that. So really excited to be able to offer that level of visibility into the workflows here. Next slide. So this slide here, and the text there is pretty small at the top, but this slide really just kind of summarizes the different integrations and interfaces that are in place. With release 2, which is already live, we have a number of different integrations with Oaks, bringing over user information from HCM, bringing over supplier information, doing the budget checks, interfacing the purchase orders back and forth between Oaks and OhioBuys, doing budget checks and looking up chart of account values, bringing all of those over, and then also bringing controlling board numbers over from Oaks for users to reference on their requisitions. As we look forward to release 3, we'll be looking at a couple of additional integrations to carry contract records that need to go into Oaks, carrying those over from OhioBuys. We'll also be continue to be pulling voucher data back out of Oaks and into OhioBuys to track payments against contracts so that we can manage those maximum spend limits that if they're established on a contract. And then we'll also be looking to integrate with the Secretary of State's office. We're still actively in discussions with them, kind of evaluating the possibility of doing an integration to look up supplier charter or entity numbers and validate that the number that we have in OhioBuys is correct. And then we'll also be integrating with the state's electronic signature solution, which is OneSpan Sign. And that will be in order to facilitate the signing of contracts in particular, so that the state and the supplier that's been selected can both sign those contracts electronically. It won't be required that agencies use that electronic signature feature, but it is something that will be available to them. Next slide, please. So I wanted to take a couple of minutes and just kind of provide some general updates on what we're doing. We have been out working with our agencies, all of our early adopters, and actually gone out and collected feedback from them. Some of the key features or key things that we heard back, one of them was around supplier enablement. And really what this means is trying to just continue to increase the number of suppliers that are registered to use the system. And so we are working with those suppliers constantly. We have here in the last couple of months here begun to do even more targeted outreach. We've worked with the Equal Opportunity Division to kind of understand all of their registered MBEs in particular. One of the things that agencies have communicated back is, as we're in the system doing quick quotes, for example, and soliciting suppliers, we really want the ability to solicit those MBEs as much as possible to help us achieve our set-aside goals. Also been working heavily on working with our contracted vendors as well as their dealers on state contracts to make sure that they're getting into the system, getting set up and able to acknowledge purchase orders, different things like that in the system. And then we've also been continuing to hold our supplier webinars. These are held every Friday. We usually have 2 every Friday. And in the last couple of weeks, we've actually seen the numbers to really start to significantly grow. We used to see maybe 10, 20, 30 suppliers in a webinar. As of about 2 weeks ago here, we were starting to see some webinars that had upwards of more than 100 different suppliers included in the webinar. So really excited about the growth and participation that we're seeing there. We are also starting to take a more strategic look at how we grow that supplier contact base. We are currently involved in kind of analyzing a couple of different layers of data to really kind of hone in on who are those suppliers that we're currently using, who are those suppliers that early adopter agencies used to do business with but haven't done business with lately, just kind of segmenting it out in a couple of different ways so that we can really cater the messaging to those different segments of suppliers. Again, really with the interest of getting them into OhioBuys, getting them registered with an OHID so that they can come into the system and actually use it to interact with state agencies that are submitting purchase orders through the system. Next slide, please. We're also doing what we call an enhancement phase. So coming out of release 2, our pilot agencies, our early adopter agencies have really identified a lot of great ideas in terms of, hey, we'd really like it if it worked like this instead, and tweaking some things here and there. You can kind of see some of the key areas that we're going to be focused on here. This work actually began here in about mid-April, and we are really, just kind of going in a sort of a 2-week sprint type of cycle. So every 2 weeks we're doing a release to push out a number of enhancements. We currently actually we've done about 6 enhancements so far. As of this Friday, we'll actually almost double that number. We'll be up to 11 total. And then at the end of May, we will actually have about 23 total enhancements done in the system. So really excited about the progress that we're making here in order to kind of take that user feedback and start to implement some enhancements to the system based on that feedback, really in the interest of trying to make sure that we're continuing to improve that user experience, not only for suppliers, but also for our internal users. And we're also bringing those agencies in as we start to talk about those enhancements, in more detail to say, how do you really want it to function? Bringing them in so that they actually, really feel like they have a seat at the table, and not just using the design agencies that I had spoken about previously. Next slide, please. As we look forward then to release 3, we, like I said, will be focused on that release, really building out the full solicitation and contract management set of functionality, as well as data analytics. And this will really allow us to do, sort of full-blown management of solicitations in the system, as well as full contract management. And then ultimately also giving users the ability to go and grab data out of the system that's meaningful to them, that can kind of help drive their decision-making processes. And we are, kind of in this phase right now of focusing both on the enhancements as well as release 3. We're kind of taking a very deliberate approach of, some days of the week we focus on enhancements, other days that we're focusing on release 3. So we're trying to kind of keep the both tracks or both sets of functionality on track to make sure that we're not only enhancing the system, but continuing to move forward with building out the rest of the solution, so that by the fall here we can offer state agencies a full procure-to-pay electronic procurement solution. Next slide. Out beyond the fall of this year, we will be, working with the other cabinet agencies and boards and commissions to onboard them into the solution. At this point, we don't have a lot of specifics around what that timeline will look like yet, but that is certainly going to be the plan. We're actually starting some of those planning efforts now to really kind of, based on everything that we've seen and learned here in the first 2 releases, starting to build sort of a playbook so that we have sort of a guide as far as how to go about onboarding these agencies, things to watch out for, best practices, and then, like I said, as the year turns to 2021, really starting to kind of bring that into more focus, really understanding how that onboarding approach is going to look for those remaining agencies. Next slide. This slide here just kind of summarizes our website. So this website does, continually get updated with a ton of great information, whether you're an agency or a supplier. So I do encourage you to check that out. Also, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We do have a group email box set up here. It's just ohiobuys@das.ohio.gov. That's always a email box that we're watching very closely. So please do, feel free to reach out to us for questions or comments or concerns. And I think that's the last slide, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll just kind of see if there's any questions here.
Yes, Andrew, we do have one question for you here. It says it looks like Ohio Buys starts at the time of requisition. Are there any plans on the competitive selection process or the contracting done with agencies' spending authority?
Yeah, so that'll actually be part of release 3. When we talk about release 3, it will cover both not only the Office of Procurement Services procurement processes for doing competitive selections, but we will also have that contract management, that solicitation functionality made available to agencies so that they can conduct their own procurements, their own solicitations in the system as well.
Okay, great. And I'm not sure if this question is for you or someone else in the group, but the next question is, once in Fund 601, are funds not available? Or as economy improves, is there a possibility they will be available later in fiscal year 21?
As the guidance mentions, agencies should anticipate not having access to allotments in account 601. However, we do recognize that there is uncertainty and the actual reductions that may need to be made could be less than the targets that we will initially put forth. I think an argument could be made they could go in the other direction, but I think for now, agencies should not anticipate being able to access those funds.
Okay, great. Thank you. Those are all questions. Oh, wait. I have one more question for Andrew. Can you ask Andrew to contact education on phase 3? So actually that question was for me. Andrew, can you contact education on phase 3, please?
Yeah, does someone have a name that we could reach out to?
I can send that over to you.
Great, that'd be awesome, thank you.
And then also, in terms of the 601 fund, is that the case for non-GRF too?
Well, as I mentioned earlier in the meeting, we are not developing holding targets for non-GRF funds. However, if agencies recognize that certain non-GRF funds are being impacted due to the pandemic and revenues and the cash balance is not sufficient to support the appropriation in the fund, then we are asking that agencies work with analysts to identify allotments to move into account 601.
Okay, those are all the questions so far.
All right, well, thank you, Nikki. So we're going to move on to our last presenter. It's Payal from Business Intelligence. So just so everybody knows, we are getting close on time, so we may go over the 11 o'clock hour a little bit, but I think we're still going to be good. So Payal, I will turn it over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. Appreciate Melvin, Amber, and Nikki for getting this together. I will try to make this as fast and quick as possible, and let me know if there's any questions while we are doing this. Good morning again. If we can go to the next slide. Okay. So I'm Payal Thakur. Basically, we are from DAS. We work very closely with OBM and a lot of your agencies. And coming back from my CFO days, your role is very crucial to everything from how the accounting works to the reporting. So we just want to make sure we're available for you. Especially, I heard a lot about the COVID reporting and how you guys are doing a great job with all of the current crisis. If you guys need any help on the data analytics or the business intelligence reporting, whether that's Cognos or Tableau, again, just reach out to me. I have a couple of emails at the end that you can definitely also reach out to. With that, I'm gonna skip this slide. It's basically talking about how we are supporting the advisory, hosting, enterprise data training and server support on both Cognos and Tableau. So I'm gonna skip these slides. You guys already know that you can reach us, and this is all at no additional cost to your agencies. Okay. I just wanted to mention we're very happy to announce that we are constantly trying to support you technologically. We keep up on our updates. There's some great features, some great free trainings available. Previously, people had to buy desktops for Tableau. The server is already provided by DAS at no cost, but I just wanted to let you know that for people that are facing the reductions, especially this would help your agency with reductions in costs, you can now avail the free web authoring, so you don't even need your desktops. You can just ask us and we'll guide you through that. And the next thing I want to talk about is the Fin dashboards that were developed with the CFO Council over the last year and a half, and they are available. I know there's a lot of people use it, but for those who are new with the new administration, this is a great resource. It has all of your accounting needs in there. It pulls from the same database as the interactive budget.ohio and the Cognos reporting and the Tableau reporting. They're all synced and they should match, and they should be able to help you with some live dashboards. Okay, moving on to the next one. All right, we can skip this one too. It's just talking about how we collaborated with all of you to come up with these dashboards. Okay, these are the 19 dashboards. I'm leaving a screenshot here. If you have access in HR and finance in Oaks, you would have access to these as well. If there's any questions, again, shoot me an email and we'll do a one-on-one session with your agency and your people to help you. Okay. All right, so this is just an example of one of the finance dashboards and the top usage in different agencies and different people. And you can see it's widely used. At the bottom there is a PDF which has screenshots of all of the dashboards that were developed to kind of quickly browse through and say, hey, this is the dashboard that we use most, the PO dashboard or whichever that one is, and you can quickly get to the one that's most useful to you. Okay. On each of the dashboards, there is a help button. So that's just showing you the daily cash balance here, for example, is live. Unlike the Cognos report, which is a day delayed on the cash, this one's live. So this should be exactly matching what you have today. Okay. All right, so I just want to take a few seconds to talk about the Cognos, a few minutes to talk about the Cognos upgrade. We currently have our team supporting this initiative. It's been 4 years since we did this upgrade. We started in March and it go live July 6th. And all the documentation is available here. We will take care of all the standard reports. There's a new interface. There's a lot of visualizations that you can take advantage of for those people who want to summarize and visualize just like Tableau does it. This would be contained to the Oaks data. Tableau, of course, connects to all sorts of data outside Oaks as well. There will be improved dictionary and navigation. Okay. Moving along, all of the 120 agencies are expected to see the impact. I do really appreciate all of your agencies in the UAT participation. It's going on right now for 3 weeks. If you can please check with your agencies that they are invited and are doing it. If we've missed you, I apologize. We will be happy to take care of it and include you as soon as you let us know. And as mentioned earlier, we're using all kinds of communications to make sure everybody's informed and on board with us. Also, one very important aspect is we're working with OBM on making all of the BPM budget and planning reports available to you, and we're working closely to make sure that goes seamlessly. Okay. All right, this is just a roadmap. We can skip it, but basically it's telling you that the go live is on July 6th, and there's a slew of team that is very supportive, and their expertise is helping us get through a lot of the technicalities pretty smoothly. Okay. And this is just a screenshot showing you how the old Cognos looked at the top and how the future Cognos is going to look. As you can see, there's some navigational improvements or updates, or I don't know if they're improvements, but they're definitely changes that you might want to get acquainted to as you are going through this upgrade. Okay. Same thing, just a view of the current and the future. Okay. All right, Cognos 11, again, the UAT objectives and scope are underlined here. If you want to see the details, I would encourage you to go through them. There's a daily UAT call, which the team supports. There's a quick link that you guys can survey at the end of it. So those are some tools that will help you get to speed on the UAT testing. Okay. This is just a quick representation of the day of the life and of UAT. So we are putting this out there. It's very simple, but we just want to make sure it's out there for you to look at. And again, if there's any questions, you can type it on the chat, or you can just email me after the presentation. Okay, I know I went through very quickly, and I just wanted to let you know, for all your enterprise needs, whether it's reporting, data analytics, please let us know. We would like to support you technologically in terms of all of that. We've done some great stuff on the COVID dashboards. Most of you must have seen the ODH that website, which has the Tableau dashboards in there with key metrics and all of the data by county. That's our team supporting the governor and the ODH website for coronavirus every day at 2 p.m. So those are some little things. We work with Jennifer Laymaster on a lot of the COVID reporting. Again, just wanted to stress, you guys are doing great. You're in the front line. And if you need any back support, please reach out to us for any of those COVID or non-COVID related reporting and analytics. And this is Payal Thakur with DAS OIT, and I really appreciate our partnership with OBM and all of your agencies. Thank you. Any questions, Nikki?
No, I haven't had any questions come through. You did a great job.
Thank you. Okay. Have a good day, everyone. Yes.
Right. So as part of our wrap up, we have the next CFO quarterly meeting scheduled for August 12th. So be looking forward to that. And as we always try to end the meeting with, if there's any questions from anybody out there, if there's future topics that you would like to us to bring up, just let us know. Nikki can unmute you, or you can type it in the chat.
Silence so far.
Okay. So we appreciate everybody's attendance. We are just about a couple minutes over here, but we appreciate it. And as always, if you have any other questions, you can reach out to any of us at OBM, your OBM budget analyst, or anybody in state accounting. If you think of those topics later, just feel free to send us an email, and we'll try to get it prepared for the next CFO meeting. And we'll just give it one last chance, Nikki, to see if anybody has any questions before we end the meeting.
Nope, no questions.
All righty. Well, thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your day. And we'll see you the next quarter meeting.